This lecture, part 2 of 4, will cover the chemical level of organization in the human body and provide a chemical foundation for the course. The topics of chemical reactions and enzymes will be discussed. In a chemical reactions, bonds between atoms can be broken, or new bonds between atoms can form. A reaction begins with reactants, the molecules or atoms that will undergo a chemical change. The products of a chemical reaction are the substances that the reactants rearrange to form. Traditionally, in chemical equations, the reactants are listed on the left-hand side of an arrow, and the products are listed on the right-hand side of the arrow. In the equation below, the hydrogen atoms and oxygen atoms are the reactants, and the water molecule is the product. The equation would be read as the combination of hydrogen and oxygen yields water. Chemical reactions are continuously occurring in the human body. The sum of all these chemical reactions is referred to as metabolism. Energy is important in the human body because the body needs to do work in order to function. Energy is defined as the capacity to do work and has two forms: kinetic energy and potential energy. Kinetic energy refers to the energy of motion, while potential energy refers to stored energy. Energy can be converted from one form to the other, as demonstrated in the diagram below. There is potential energy in the ball at the top of the hill. Once the ball begins to roll down the hill, the energy that was stored as potential energy is converted to kinetic energy, the energy of motion. The body relies on three types of chemical reactions: decomposition reactions, synthesis reactions, and exchange reactions. In a decomposition reaction, a molecule is broken down into smaller parts. We can see here that a larger molecule, AB, will be broken down into smaller components, A and B. In the body, these decomposition reactions are often hydrolysis reactions. In a hydrolysis reaction, water is added across the bond that breaks. Let's examine how this works. Here we have a molecule AB. We will add water to AB, and that water will be added across the bond between them as that bond breaks. The result is two smaller fragments, AH and HOB, A containing the hydrogen from the water, and B bonded now to the OH from the water. So we see how water is added across that bond, breaking the bond, resulting in two smaller products. When the covalent bond between AB in that molecule is broken, energy is released. Decomposition reactions are known as catabolic reactions, reactions in the body that release kinetic energy to do work. In a synthesis reaction, larger molecules are made from smaller parts. In this case, we're going to take smaller components, A and B, combine them together to form a larger molecule, AB. In the body, these are often dehydration synthesis reactions, also known as condensation reactions. Dehydration synthesis is the opposite reaction of a hydrolysis reaction. In a dehydration synthesis reaction, a complex molecule forms by removing water from two smaller components. Let's take a look. In this case, the components of water, a hydrogen from one molecule and an OH from another, are removed, resulting in the formation of a water molecule and in the formation of a bond between A and B, resulting in a larger molecule. So here we have two smaller components. The H from this component as well as the OH from this component will combine to form water as a product. This leaves A and B bonded together in a larger molecule represented by AB. The newly formed bond between A and B is a source of stored energy. This is an example of anabolism, the synthesis of a new compound that acts as a storage molecule in the body. To summarize, Decomposition reactions are examples of catabolism. Larger molecules are broken down and energy is released. Synthesis reactions are examples of anabolism. Smaller molecules combine to form larger molecules and energy is stored in the newly formed bonds. The third type of reaction the body utilizes is known as exchange reactions. In an exchange reaction, there is a shuffling of the parts of the molecules involved. First, the reactants will undergo a decomposition reaction to break apart, followed by a synthesis reaction resulting in the combination of different components forming new products. In this example, the bond between A and B will break, forming its components A plus B, and the bond between C and D will break, resulting in its smaller components of C plus D in that series of decomposition reactions. The decomposition reactions will be followed by synthesis reactions, where the reactants will reshuffle to make new products. A will combine with D, and C will be combined with B to form the new products AD plus CB. Reversible reactions. Reversible reactions refer to reactions that can freely proceed from reactants to products or products to reactants. They are often denoted by this double-headed arrow seen here. This means that the reaction can go forward in the case where the reactants A and B will combine to make a larger molecule AB, or the larger molecule AB can actually proceed in the reverse direction and break down into its smaller components B and A. At the same time, the synthesis and decomposition is going on. It is said to be in equilibrium if that rate of the forward and reverse reaction is equal. What this means is that when the rate of the two reactions are equal or in balance, the reaction is said to be in equilibrium. When A and B are combining to form AB at the same rate that AB is breaking down into its smaller components, A plus B, this occurs. In order for a reaction to proceed, an initial amount of energy is going to be required. This initial amount of energy is known as the activation energy. Once the activation energy has been reached, the reaction will proceed and the reactants will react to form their product or products. The graph below represents this process. We can see that we start with reactants at a certain energy state. In order for the reactants to go ahead and form their products, we first need to put some energy into the system. The energy that we have to put into the system is known as the activation energy. Once the activation energy has been reached, the reaction will continue and move forward to form the product. Many essential reactions in the body would happen too slow on their own to be of use to us. This problem is avoided because chemical reactions in the body are accelerated by proteins known as enzymes. Enzymes act as catalysts and speed up the chemical reactions by lowering the activation energy, allowing for the reactions to proceed at a faster rate. So when an enzyme is present, the reaction will still begin at the same energy level, but now instead of having to climb the tall hill here to overcome that high activation energy, the energy of activation is lowered by that enzyme to here, so it will take less time to achieve it, and the reaction can proceed forward to form the products. The enzymes themselves are not changed, and their function will be further discussed in the next lecture segment. While all reactions require an activation energy to proceed, the overall reaction can result in the absorption or release of energy. Exergonic reactions release energy, and endergonic reactions absorb energy. The graph on the previous slide, shown here, is an example of an exergonic reaction. the reactant started at a certain energy level, as the reaction proceeded, the products ended up at an energy level lower. As a result, this indicates that energy was released. In the case of endergonic reactions, the energy is given off as the reaction proceeds. Will not be greater than the activation energy required to start the reaction, resulting in energy absorption. So in this case, if we had our graph of energy by the proceeding of the reaction, our reactants would overcome their activation energy, but that energy level would be at a higher state at the end. So we started here, ended up here, indicating that more energy was put in the system from the beginning to the end. Most reactions in the body are exergonic. That is, energy will be released as they proceed from reactants to products. Let's take a minute to check our understanding. Identify and describe the 3 types of chemical reactions important to human physiology. Feel free to pause the lecture while you prepare your response and resume when you are ready. The 3 types of chemical reactions important to human physiology are the decomposition reaction, which is the breakdown of larger molecules into smaller components associated with catabolism, the release of energy, and an example would be hydrolysis. Synthesis reactions, the formation of larger molecules from smaller molecules, are associated with anabolism, storage of energy in the bonds, and an example would be dehydration synthesis. The 3rd type of reaction we studied was exchange reactions. These are decomposition reactions followed by synthesis reactions, resulting in the shuffling of the reactants into new products.